Hi. So we come back again, and this part of the video I'm going to discuss at threadbare the past percentages of CFA December 2020 exam. It has been an extraordinary year by all means, and after the results were announced for level 1, which witnessed 49% pass rate, level 2 witnessed a 55% pass rate. Of course, it's kind of unheard of if you consider the last decade. And a level 3 at normalized pass rate of 56%. There were a lot of brouhaha. There were a lot of skepticism running around. In fact, one of the charter holders in one of the social media proclaimed that the CFA Institute is now running from being a Porsche 911 to a Boxster route. In short, what he's trying to imply is perhaps the institute is more keen to monetizing and commoditizing the course rather than still retain the brand value and the gold standard that it is famously known for. Now, is it true? Is it likely that going forward the CFA charter is likely to lose its value, lose its sheen? Is it likely to go the same path of many of the previously better known rechristened courses like that of the MBA, even from the Ivy League schools of US, UK, or even India, or let's say the chartered accountancy route, wherein you have dime a dozen, plenty in the market? Well, let's dwell a little further and let's get down to it. And let me assure you, I'm not going to talk off the hat. I'm going to present certain figures, certain numbers, and let you be the judge of it. So let's go back to the history a bit to understand the whole thing. 1947, four research societies came together and they thought that there is a need for officiating or formalizing the investment community as such in order to restore ethics, because 1920s we had a Great Depression, we had a huge stock market crash in the US, so the need for formalization became all the more imminent. With the view of that, 1963, four societies, that is Boston, New York, Chicago and Philadelphia, came together and they offered the first CFA exam in 1963 under the brand called Association of Investment Management and Research. Mind you, those days, which is almost 6 decades back, it was all an American course. Okay, 284 candidates actually took the exam, of which 94% of the candidates passed. So as on date 2021, 21st of February 2021, if any of those charter holders are still around us, so well, you made it. Wow, congratulations. 6 decades after, you only had to take one exam to earn the coveted CFA charter, right? Now let's just try and see how the journey has been. So from 1963, when we had less than 300 candidates taking just one exam to earn the CFA charter, it took almost 5 years to reach the goal of 1700 registrations. And of course, by that time, the AIMR, formerly, which right now is known as the CFA Institute, AIMR had already graded the exam into level 1, level 2 and level 3. So if you have to give you a split and breakup of the 1700 odd people who had registered for the exam in 1967, well, we had about 600 people for L1, 550 people for L2 and another 550 odd people for L3. And the pass percentage was 71% for L1, 89% for L2, I believe, and 90% plus for L3. Quite a remarkable achievement, isn't it? So let me just pause the video for a moment and let's just think about it. Why not elevate the percentage a bit more? Why it is only limited to 70%? Why not make it 90% across the board for L1, L2 or L3? By that, they would have perhaps been they could have propagated their number of candidates more. They could have accumulated more number of candidates who would have had the charter, right? It wasn't until 1988. It wasn't until 1988 that the CFA Institute had 5,000 registration. So the first, it took about 25 years in 1987 when 5,700 odd people registered for the exam across all the three levels, level 1, 2 and 3, and on overall basis they had a pass percentage of 62%. So the next milestone comes somewhere around 1992 when this 5,000 odd candidates turned to 10,000 odd candidates, and please understand, even then it was just an American course, right? It was a small society, it was a small institute, and relatively unknown, and 11,000 people would register for the exam, and you would still see somewhere around 65, mid-60s of pass percentage. So that was encouraging, but I don't know. Now, the late 90s, it took about close to 5 years from 1987, that is 1992, when this 5,000 figures of registration surpassed and became 30,000 figures. Okay, from 30,000, it wasn't until I believe 2006, yes, so 2006, a jump of almost 14 years, CFA Institute actually crossed 100,000 registration in a year. Okay, 2004 was also the time that AIMR, hitherto what was known as AIMR, disbanded itself or rechristened itself as the CFA Institute. Of course, by 2004-2005, it had already become a global program. People from around the world, whether it was UK, Canada, Argentina, Spain, India, well, not very sure. No, I don't think in early 2000 or mid 2000 we had the Indian test centers here. I may be wrong, so I say this with some bit of reservation. And that's a different story altogether. Why it happened? Because the CFA Institute had entered into a legal battle with the ICFI Hyderabad, which in turn actually had mimicked and copied most of the syllabus, most of the course contents of the CFA Institute, and marketed those courses under the brand of Indian CFA. I don't know what happens. Most of these scams originate from Hyderabad, and you had a Satyam out from there. You had a ICFI Institute. Let's not get into it, lest I upset some of my audience. All right. So the core of the topic is that the institute had grown its registration from a meager 300 odd people to 100,000 odd registration by 2005. That's the core. So from 2005, it had seen a steady progress of registration. The institute had spread its wing across the world. It had established society. Today, as I speak to you, the institute has more than 200 societies around the world. And the prominent growth in new registrations, fresh registrations, have come from Asia, more precisely Southeast Asian communities. Okay, so you have Singapore, you have Hong Kong, China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia. These are the emerging markets. These are the markets where the institute had made the highest inroads. Of course, in absolute terms, these markets are still nowhere near to the number of charter holders as we would have in the US or in UK or even in Canada. But the growth rate out here is in double digit. All right. So from there, let's now just take a look back in what has happened in the last 10 years. So as you can see in the graph, that in the last 10 years, the institute has actually migrated, I believe, from 157,000 odd registration in 2010 to 270 odd thousand registration in 2019. For obvious reasons, I have excluded the 2020 registration, and we are going to first analyze what has happened in the last decade, and that perhaps will give you the perspective that where we are and if there is any chance of dilution as many of these skeptics have proclaimed going forward. So if you look at it, in the last decade we have grown in terms of registration. The institute has grown close to 5% CAGR. Now, traditionally, 5% CAGR is again spread across all the three levels. So you have level 1, you have level 2 and level 3. if you talk about the level 1, the institute has grown in terms of fresh registration at the CAGR rate of 5.33%. The level 2 registration obviously is going to be a little higher than that, it is around 5.6%, and the level 3 registration is at 6% CAGR. In terms of absolute numbers, the CFA Institute level 1 registration has grown from 94,000 approximately to 158,000 in 2019. The level 2 candidate registration has grown from 43,000 to 75,000 approximately, and the level 3 registrations have grown from 21,500 to 38,500 respectively. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that there is a steady growth, and but obvious that the highest number of registration will be witnessed in level 1 program, followed by the level 2 program, followed by the level 3 program. As a percentage, please take again another look at the graph which is right here in front of you, and let me just clarify a little more on the graph front that the registration spread is the way it looks at 47% are registrations for L1, 59% are registrations for L1, 27% of the total registrations are for L2, and 14% of new registrations are in L3. Well, that's been the story in the last decade from 2010 to 2019. Alright, so what we have got, we have dwelt upon the brief history of CFA Institute, how it has grown from 300 candidates to 270,000 candidates in terms of registration as on the end date of 2019. We also gave the CAGR of 5% growth rate. We also talked about the spread across all the 3 levels, and we also talked about the percentage participation of all the 3 levels of registration. Okay, all right. So from there, now let's take a close look to what has happened in 2020 December. And that figure unfortunately is not very encouraging for variety of reasons, and let me boil down a little bit more. So 2020 December, we had the registration across all the 3 levels of less than 56,000 across the world. Now, when was this kind of registration witnessed last? It was in 2005 when we had a total registration of close to, it was in 2000. So it's almost 2 decades back when we had total number of registration close to about 53,000, mid 50s. So it's kind of comparable. 2005 I actually did make a mention of, because the pass levels of the level 1 candidate in 2005 was very similar to what we had witnessed this time around, because I believe the 2005 level 2 pass rates were very similar to what we had. Around 56% of the candidates in 2005 had passed their level 2 exam. 2020 December we had 55%. That's kind of comparable. Now, when it comes to the 2005 level 3, that figure still hovers around 55%. We had around 56% here, which is again kind of comparable. I don't see much of a variation out there. And the last time, the last time we had 49% level 1 pass, that was in way back in 2001. And 2001 we had close to 36,000 candidates registering for the exam for level 1, of which 17,700 odd actually successfully managed to pass the exam. So that figure kind of is comparable to what we have right now. Okay, so what happened then? So for whatever reason, of course that reason is no longer important. I mean, it is of course important, but let me not stretch upon that reason. For 2020 December, the total number of registration the total number of L1 candidates, L2 candidates and L3 candidates, it's obviously a sharp detour. It's a sharp deviation from the normal over the last decade. We had the least number of registration and the pass rates are comparable to somewhere in the early 2000s. All right, but before that, along with that rather, let me also tell you that what has happened with the elevated pass rate and why the elevated pass rate looks the way it is. Again, please take a closer look at the graph here. So earlier we talked about that the registration spread across the three levels in the last decade had been 59% for level 1, 27% for level 2 and 14% for level 3. Well, that has changed drastically in 2020 December. We had only 47% of L1, 33% in L2 and 20% in L3. This is the spread across the 56,000 of new registrations that have happened. Okay. Now, since traditionally, L1 has the lowest pass percentage and L3 has the highest pass percentage. Hence, the overall weighted pass percentage across all the three levels appeared heavily skewed at 53%. Normally, over the last decade, the average pass percentage across all the three levels put together in any given year has been 43%. So clearly, this year has been deviation. But there are other factors as well, and we must take into consideration those factors. So what could be those factors? Well, if you ask me, the number one factor that I can think of is June 2020 exam did not happen, right? That gave the candidates that much amount of time who were already scheduled to take their exam in June, and they had to postpone the exam because of COVID. And the only candidates who took the exam in 2020 December were the ones who had obviously prepared the best, of course I can think of, were the ones who wanted to get over the hump, come hell or high water, were the ones who were brave enough to come to the center. And of course, I believe that, fortune always favors the brave. So that's what I think I can think of. And secondly, as I mentioned, that the overall pass percentage as a group skewed this year because this year witnessed the lowest amount of L1 participation, which traditionally was close to 60%, with the least amount of pass percentage had only 47% of registration. That skewed the overall pass percentage from 43% to 53, from 43% to 53%. All right. The last but not the least reason that I can think of is that several of the Asian centers were cancelled. India, for instance, were completely cancelled. So that obviously, I can think of, it may not be completely correct, but I can think of that may have some sort of impact, because traditionally the candidates of subcontinent and China put together, they kind of, I believe that they have a better pass percentage, better success rate than the rest of the world. So when you put all of these factors together, the situation becomes very, very clear that 2020 December was an exception. It had the least number of registration overall. It had the least number of registration as far as level 1 was concerned. Many of the prominent centers or many of the prominent countries did not participate, where the higher success rates were being witnessed traditionally. And of course, last but not the least, the candidates obviously had much more time to themselves. So all of these factors put together, it led to an elevated pass rate of 49% in L1, 55% in L2, and L3 was pretty normalized. So in addition to that, I would also like to say that in statistical terms, you're likely to, when you're conducting an exam over the last 6 decades, it is but natural that you would have certain data points which are going to behave in a non-normal way, which means that those data can be exception, aberration in terms of pass percentage. They might be outliers. So we have from time to time, if you open the past schedule of the CFA Institute for the last 6 decades, you would see that time and again, if you leave aside the first decade and a half, time and again you would have those sporadic years where the candidates have found to have excelled the exam with a very high pass percentage. And in the same breath, it is pertinent to mention that there would have been years where the overall performance have been found very, very dwindling and bleak. So that happens. That does not change the course of the prestige. That does not dilute the charter. That has got nothing to do with how the institute wants the charter to be. So I believe that I have been able to put this thing at rest. Now let's take a quick look at how the charter is going to evolve. What I believe, or the majority of the candidates that I have been in touch with, they believe. Okay. So if you really ask me, the CFA Institute along with Mercer conducted a study late in 2018, or I believe somewhere in 2019, to understand how the landscape is evolving, how the changes are coming in. So what appeared was there were close to 1 million core investment professional job that is existing in whole of the world. Now, when I say core investment professionals, please bear in mind the data in particular pertains to the registered analyst of the sovereign. So, for instance, if somebody is a research analyst and he is doing a pro bono work through his social media account in YouTube, LinkedIn, and blah blah blah, but yet he is unregistered. So even though he may or may not be a CFA charter holder or a CFA candidate, that count is not taken into consideration. So the data is being gleaned out from the respective countries' regulating body. For example, in India it would be SEBI, in the US it would be SEC, and things like that. So all put together, there are about 1 million investment professionals. So those investment professionals can be grouped further into 3. You can take a quick look at the graph presented here, and that would give you a fair bit of an idea that what the investment professionals are actually engaged into. Now, what is the growth path? What is the road ahead? So the road ahead is that in the next 10 years, this number is going to grow from 1 million to 1.25 million, which represents an overall CAGR, overall growth of 25%. And the CAGR is something of 1.8%, roughly put together, the weighted average. Now, what does this mean further? What it means further is that there are countries which are going to witness a higher growth rate, and obviously there are the matured markets where the growth rates are going to be more or less stable. So let's take a quick look. India and China, of course, are the most hot favorite destination as far as these numbers go. So let me just put things into perspective and let me tell you statistically what the facts are. India has a registered number of analysts who are engaged into different roles and positions, as has been outlined before, close to 47,000, and this market is likely to grow by another 34% in the next 10 years, which represents a CAGR of almost 3% a year. China, on the other hand, has close to about 140,000 registered investment analysts who might be executing roles of even CFO also, doesn't matter. But it is going to grow at 26% in the next 10 years, representing a CAGR of 2.6%. Surprisingly, Indonesia is again a very hot destination. It has, as on date, only 23,000 registered investment professionals, but the growth for the next 10 years is pegged at somewhere around close to 30%. So that also represents a CAGR of 2.8%. So as I was mentioning, that these markets are the ones which are going to hold key to the future of CFA Institute's program, whether it's a CFA charter or CIPM program. All right. Now, what does this mean? So it brings into perspective a couple of things. One is that the overall growth rate of registration has been outlined is growing at the rate of 5%, while that's the supply side from the CFA Institute. And the demand side, if we look at only the Southeast Asian market, is growing at a rate of give or take a few basis points here and there. It's growing at a rate of 3%. All right. Now, again, it is pertinent to mention that the sample set is restricted to the registered analysts only. There are, of course, analysts, there are opinion holders, there are advisors who are not registered, yet some of them are doing pretty good job. So those figures are not being taken into consideration. Only from the bucket of the registered analysts, what we can find out is that that growth rate is somewhere around 3%. And again, one pertinent thing to understand is that this whole pie is not going to be only served through the CFA Institute chapters. You have the MBA finance from the better known B schools, but I believe, having interacted quite a few number of la creme de la creme MBA finance students vis-a-vis the CFA charter holders, my personal belief is that MBA finance, regardless of where you do from, they're nowhere close to CFA. They were nowhere close to in terms of content, depth, quality, and the rigor of the program. There are, I hate to put a number around it, but if I have to, I would not even rate, let's say, in the third or fourth position from the CFA's standpoint. So that's the gap. That's the kind of gap. But it's a little bit of a drudgery that CFA Institute is yet to gain and yet to attain that kind of recognition that it actually deserves. I hope that going forward, things would change, and things would change for the better. So the next generation of charter holders, they are going to be the flag bearers. They are going to uphold the gold standard of the CFA Institute's program, and raise the bar. That's the objective of the institute. So before I conclude, let me put things into perspective once again. And the thing is that your charter, or the value of the charter, is only going to grow. It is not going to be diluted by any means. Granted that there have been certain sea changes that the institute has introduced in 2021 and going forward, but that is only going to help the candidates. Please understand, in our times when I passed my exam, we didn't have the luxury of taking level 1 exam 3 or 4 times a year, or level 2s or level 3s 2 times a year. So a candidate, and most of the candidates who are today successful charter holders, have perhaps failed the program once or twice in one or the other levels. The flip side of that is that if you fail the June exam in level 2 or level 3, you had to wait a full 12 months. And in addition to that, you might have to deal with new contents and new syllabus altogether. So, and not to mention that you still have to maintain the same tempo. So, the institute, I believe, has modernized that. Instead, the changes that it has brought in, that the level 2s or the level 3s now have the luxury to retake the exam within a gap of 6 months. Now, imagine those candidates who are just a tad bit below the final passing marks. With a little bit of push on the pedal, they would have definitely surpassed the golden line. They have a chance now. They won't have to wait for 12 months. It's another 6 months, and they can get the charter. Is this good? Yes, of course it is good, because at the end of the day, please understand who the institute in this market, who the institute is competing with. They're competing with most of the postgraduate programs, right? So most of the postgraduate programs do culminate within 2 years, and if the institute has to deliver the goods and be competitive in the market along with them, so they will also have to culminate the program or devise the program in such a way that the best of the candidates have had the opportunity, at least, to complete the programs in 2 or 2.5 or at the max 3 years. Okay, so it's a welcome move. Make the most of it. Now, before I conclude, I also have to tell you a few facts, a trivia, if you must like. In the last 6 decades, only close to 165,000 odd people have successfully managed to earn the charter and retain it. In India, the number of people who have the CFA charter is less than 2,400 people. Okay, so which means that there are a lot of scope, there are a lot of penetration which is awaited, and I believe that the society will be better served by the rules that Mark Franklin has been bringing in. So good luck. Don't let the the myths throw you off. Analyze. I have presented the figure to all of you. Analyze it for yourself. The institute is going to be in good stead, and it's going to keep its flag flying higher. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.